So now I want to present our next speaker. It's Dr. Teresita Perez, who is a faculty of the Department of Environmental Science at Ateneo de Manila. She is also a professorial lecturer in the Institute of Biology, University of the Philippines. So Tess, as we call her, or Doc P, by the students, is a freshwater ecologist where her favorite organisms are the microalgae. She's a phycologist, but aside from the taxonomic aspect, she also studies the ecology of these organisms. Lately, she has worked on metallophytes, considering the country's status being rich in mineral resources, and at the same time, a hotspot for biodiversity. Her presentation today is on the riparian ecosystem of the Upper Marikina River Basin, a protected area but exposed to anthropogenic pressures. Studies in the riparian areas of this watershed are relevant since a water reservoir dam will be constructed in the midstream part with a hydropower dam in the upstream of the river system. So thank you very much, Tess.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. I will do the slide sharing.
Yep, I can see it.
I'll just move it. Thank you also. It's an honor to be a part of this parallel session sponsored by PAASE. I'm also happy to meet some of my friends attending this parallel session.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. The title of the presentation is Integrated Floral, Faunal, and Soil Assessments of the Riparian Corridors in a Protected Landscape. My co-authors are Brett De Leon, Ruby Descalzo, Eman Lacadin, Rene Claveria, Milet Mendoza, Sofia Dairit, all from the Department of Environmental Science, Ateneo de Manila University, and Francis Magbanwa of the Institute of Biology, UP Diliman. Riparian corridors provide indispensable ecosystem and economic services. Well, as ecologists, you know that an ecotone facilitates dynamic interaction between the adjacent terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem, influencing soil texture, regulating water quality, supporting aquatic life, and enhancing floral and faunal diversity of the area. So this photo would actually show you a part of the riparian area of the river system, where some people would cross from one bank to another. Some people swimming and doing their laundry. Next, this is the figure of the Marikina River Basin, where major municipalities of Rizal are included, together with some cities such as Quezon City, Caloocan, Pasig, Makati, Taguig, and Cainta and Taytay. In 2015, the DENR declared the Upper Marikina River Basin Protected Landscape as a critical watershed, at the same time a protected area. Actually, the original inhabitants of the area are the Dumagats, plus some lowlanders. But eventually, the Aklanans from Panay migrated in the area. So there's actually clans of people from Aklan speaking Ilonggo and Kinaraya when we went there. During dry season, portions of the river is used for local ecotourism. So people would build huts, have it rented out, and families would come over, they will swim and have picnics. And some portions, also during summer season, some portions of the riparian area is converted into vegetable plantations. So the products such as eggplant, tomatoes, are transported downstream via the river and sold to the nearby market. Also, plans are laid down for the construction of a dam in the midstream, as mentioned by Yob, and also a hydropower dam in the upstream of Montalban River. But we need more data. There's a scarcity of studies in this protected landscape. The objective of this study is to provide baseline data on the riparian ecology of the upper Marikina River Basin, particularly Montalban, Boso-Boso, and Tayabasan River. At the center is a photo of the sampling sites. So the yellow pins would show you the yellow, the green, and the red would show you the sampling sites. So this is Montalban River, where the water quality is relatively pristine. And there would be local ecotourism in the area. And this one is Boso-Boso River. Water quality is not as good. Effluents coming from backyard piggery as well as hog farms are drained directly into the effluents are drained directly into the river and affecting its water quality. And you have Montalban River, you have Boso-Boso River, and would merge into the so-called Tayabasan River. In this part, there's actually a metal bridge that was built by Mapua University. This is a bridge, very sturdy bridge, that would actually provide safe passage or for the community as well as students, because the school is here. So during wet season, the water can really be very high, so that the bridge would actually serve as a safety passage for the people. On the left would show you the one sampling point. The sampling point is divided into 3 zones. Zone A is adjacent to the river. Zone C is adjacent to the terrestrial area, while Zone C is the center. So a belt transect was set up, and in each zone, 3 by 3 meter quadrat was set up also. And this would show you the sampling design. So we study the floral diversity as well as the above ground biomass of the flora. Soil samples were collected from each of the zones, and the fauna, macroinvertebrates particularly, were collected using colored pans. So please take note of this. The soil, on the other hand, were studied considering organic matter, moisture, pH, texture, and nutrients, particularly phosphates and nitrates. This would show you the floral diversity collected from the different sites of the riparian area, 22 families with 59 species. There was the abundance and importance of Alphenatera sessilis. And what's important is there's still the survival of the 2 true riparian flora. This is Rotula aquatica and Homonea riparia. These plants are submerged during wet season. But then, when summer comes back, the vegetative structures will develop, as well as the flowers and the seeds. So the picture is relatively small. This is actually a ladybug associated with the leaves of Rotula aquatica. So based on our study, all sites have stable to more stable floral community structure. Sampling was done sampling regime was done during the transition between the wet and the dry season. The area actually is basically of the climate type 1 classification, but the upper parts of the basin is classified as the climate 2 classification. Floral zone pairings for the 2 sampling regimes were done using Shannon Diversity Index p-value, as well as the Jacquard Similarity Index in terms of percentage. So based on this analysis, it showed zonation and distinct floral composition among all sites, considering the zones. So this will show you the zones. So this is A, near the river, where the true riparian flora were observed. And this is C, near the banana plantations of the locals in the area, the terrestrial area. And the C, take note of this footpath of the community, so they can move from one barangay to another. The above ground structure, we call AGB, was also studied. So all the biomass in the quadrat were collected together with with the woody and herbaceous plants on above the soil. So these are samples of the dried biomass we placed in the oven and later weighed. So we observed high species richness but lower biomass. So Brainias renua was collected. This is actually a nickel hyperaccumulator, the Homonea riparia, as well as Cogon, your Imperata cylindrica, which account for higher AGB in some zones. Generally, no significant difference in AGB, above ground biomass, was observed across zones per sampling area. Vegetation in Site 2, Zone B, is constantly disturbed, as shown earlier in the slide, where this is actually a small footpath for the community. Site B, Zone A, is abundant with talahib. And Site 6 is dominated by herbaceous vegetation. So for the fauna, 12 insect orders were noted, and the top 5 would include your Diptera, you have Araneae, and Coleoptera. There was also the interesting presence of Collembola, which would indicate high nutrient content in the soil. So the high nutrient content in the soil would actually support the floral assemblage in the riparian area of the river systems. All sites have stable to more stable community structure. Zonal pairing was also done using Shannon Diversity Index p-value, as well as the Jacquard Similarity Index, and no distinction or zonation was found considering faunal composition across sites. Flying macroinvertebrates such as butterflies, the ladybugs, the small flying insects were also observed pollinating, because the sampling regime was during the transition between the wet and the dry season, pollinating actually the vegetation with flowers. Very interesting to see. For the soil, this is characterized by the antipolo clay, a fine, mixed, well-drained, with moderate permeability. There was a numerous iron concretions and or weathered rock fragments. Moisture is about 2 to 6%, while organic matter is 1 to 4%. There was a general trend with increased distance from the river. This must be the influence of the terrestrial area. pH is 6.5 to 8.4 average, with a decreasing trend with increased distance from the river, becoming more acidic. And for the nutrients, the phosphate was from 1,400 to 2,500 milligrams per kilogram, while nitrates is 4.5 to 59 milligrams per kilogram. There's no observed trend, and factors that would affect this type of absence of trend would be the varying concentrations of iron, considering the geology of the area, and the aluminum oxides and hydroxides. Texture range from sandy to loamy sand, and there you have slope and disturbance that would influence the range of texture that we observe. So, using the integrated analysis PCA tool, these are some of the observations. One, generally no distinction among sites for the soil. Soil with higher fractions of clay have higher moisture and organic matter content. Clay particles have greater surface areas, and soil with higher silt fractions have higher nutrient levels. Also, sandy soils hold less water, organic matter, and nutrients as they easily drain. The MDS, NMDS, and CCA was also utilized to observe and study the floral and faunal composition as well as the above ground biomass. There was no observed variation across sites for floral and faunal composition as well as the above ground biomass. This may be attributed to indistinct environmental characteristics of all sites, hence indistinct composition. Yeah, by the way, of course, we use your statistical tools to observe the relationships. But most of these conclusions that we got from the statistical tools have been validated in the field. So for the fauna, we compared the riparian fauna and the benthic macroinvertebrates coming from the river system. There's a significant difference considering the riparian and the benthic community coming from the river. Well, theoretically, the larvae and the pupa of these insects in the river, when they mature, would migrate to the land area, to the riparian area. But considering the sampling regime that we did, which was during the transition, and there was still rain coming in, maybe that was the time for the adult stage of the insect to migrate to the riparian area. Further, for the integrated analysis, you have the NMDS and the CCA tools, and these are the following conclusions and observations. So relationships of certain species orders with soil parameters. So the floral species Cyanodon dactylon and insect order Columbella are associated with environments of high soil nutrients. It was actually mentioned earlier, and this is very interesting because of the Columbella can actually be an indicator of high nutrient content in the soil in the riparian area. Floral species such as Homonea riparia and Centrosema pubescens and the insect Coleoptera are associated with soil pH. So these are the following conclusions. Compositional zonation exists for flora, but not for fauna. General zonation trends were observed in some soil parameters. I mentioned actually earlier the factors that would affect the differences in terms of the texture as well as texture as well as the nutrient content in some of the zones and also some of the sampling sites. Riparian and benthic macroinvertebrates are different. So this might be due to the biological and environmental constraints of some species found in the river system, as well as the sampling regime which was done during the transition from the wet to the dry season. Integrated analysis revealed relationships between flora, fauna, and soil parameters, which is very important for a rich and developing riparian ecosystem. All sites stable to more stable floral and faunal community for now, in consideration of the existing community in the area. The study sites may be facing disturbances and pressures influencing riparia and flora to change. None of the true riparian flora, the are aquatica and Ischriparia, are in the top important species. They were just found in the zone A portion, but was not actually moving towards the other zones of the riparian ecosystem. There was also the presence of too much actually invasive species, Chromolina odorata, Amaranthus spinosum, and Saccharum spontaneum. And there was also the role of the Diptera and the Aranei in the community to enhance the interaction between the flora and the fauna. So for the last slide, these are our recommendations. Improve the uniformity of sampling frequency. Of course, the wet and the dry season should always be considered, although we have to be careful when sampling during the wet season. Increasing the distances between sites with more time for each site. You're not so familiar with the area. Well, I've gone there to check on the dam and the hydropower project as evaluator for the EMB for government. But we didn't have time we just had to work for one day, starting at 9. It was difficult. This area was very difficult to reach. So we had to maximize our time from 9 in the morning up to, let's say, 5 or 6. And we have to go back to the barangay area, considering the road, which is very difficult. Study the two riparian floral species, including their response to severe anthropogenic pressure. there has to be an improved monitoring of this protected landscape and the biodiversity within. Of course, we have to include also the protection of the dumagats, as well as the inhabitants in the area, and the dam and the hydropower endanger an already disturbed landscape. The goal as conservationists should be to improve the conditions and not to further destroy it. So thank you very much for your attention and have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Tess. Very important to see studies like these, which really provide the necessary baselines so that we make sensible conservation outcomes. But as you said, there's always a challenge of time, but you know, you've been able to pack it in with a lot of work, and it's really very encouraging that, you know, there are studies like this. Thank you. So,